Turn the lights down and get comfortable. Tonight's story begins in the dark. Before we start, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what kind of stories keep you up at night.
My name is Eli Mercer, and this was my first winter posted alone in the Alaskan backcountry. The air that morning smelled like cold iron and pine sap, the kind of smell that sticks to the inside of your nose and doesn't leave. The thermometer outside the ranger cabin read -12, but the cold felt heavier than that, like it had weight. I remember thinking the silence was wrong, not peaceful, pressurized, like the world was holding its breath. I was a rookie, fresh out of training, 3 months into what was supposed to be a quiet assignment. Trail checks, weather reports, occasional lost hikers who never listened to posted warnings. There were rules drilled into us from day one. Most were practical. Don't travel alone during whiteouts. Don't approach wildlife. Don't leave marked zones after sunset. But there was one rule that stood apart, the one they never explained. If you receive an unscheduled transmission on Channel 7 after dusk, do not respond. Log it, power down, wait for morning. They never told us why. At 4:47 p.m., the sky was already dimming, a gray-blue bruise spreading between the trees when the radio crackled. Channel 7. My first thought was interference. Aurora activity had been strong all week, and radios out here picked up everything. Then a voice came through, distorted but unmistakably human. "Ranger, any ranger, we need assistance." The sound quality was wrong. It was stretched, warbling slightly, like the signal was bending around something. The voice sounded cold, not emotionally, but physically, as if frost had settled into the speaker's lungs. I checked the logbook with stiff fingers. No scheduled flights, no research teams, no approved backcountry activity within 50 miles. My cabin creaked as the temperature dropped further, the wood popping softly like knuckles cracking. The rule echoed in my head: do not respond. I told myself to power down, to write it off as atmospheric noise, but the radio crackled again, louder this time. "Please, we can see the trees." That's when the smell changed. A sharp, acrid scent slipped into the cabin, like burnt metal or overheated wiring, even though nothing inside was running hot. I stepped outside. The forest stood motionless. Snow-draped spruce pressed in on all sides, branches sagging under their own weight. No wind, no animals, not even the distant crack of ice shifting. The radio hissed at my hip. "Ranger Mercer," the voice said. Now clearer, closer. My blood went cold. They shouldn't have known my name. I broke the rule. I lifted the radio and answered. "This is Ranger Mercer. State your emergency." The response didn't come immediately. When it did, it wasn't relief I heard. It was confusion. "We didn't expect you to answer," the voice said. And somewhere, far beyond the tree line, something metal groaned, low and massive, like the earth itself was bending.
The sound lingered after the transmission ended, a deep metallic strain that vibrated through the soles of my boots, even from the cabin porch. It wasn't an echo. It was too steady for that, too deliberate, like something under tension being forced to move. I stood there longer than I should have, breath fogging the air, radio heavy in my hand. The smell was stronger outside, burnt metal mixed with ozone, sharp enough to sting my sinuses, completely out of place in clean winter air. My training told me to log the incident, shut everything down, and wait for daylight. But another part of me, the rookie part that still believed rules existed to be bent when people were in danger, kept replaying the voice. "We can see the trees." I keyed the radio again, my thumb trembling. "Identify yourselves," I said. "Aircraft, hikers, research team, say something." Static answered first, thick and chewing. Then the voice returned, layered with faint background noise I couldn't place. "We don't know," it said. "We were flying. Then there was light. Then down." Flying? There were no scheduled flights. Weather reports had grounded everything within hundreds of miles for days. I swallowed and forced myself to think methodically. "Can you describe your location?" A pause. The static softened like someone covering a microphone. "There's snow," the voice said slowly. "Trees. They're too close together. And something large. We hit something large." My eyes drifted toward the map posted inside the cabin, marked with safe corridors and forbidden zones. One area remained unlabeled, a wide stretch of forest shaded gray with a simple notation, "Restricted Airspace, do not enter." No explanation, no coordinates. At the time, I'd assumed military, but this park was too remote, too empty. I glanced at the clock. 5:02 p.m. Full night would fall in less than an hour. "Stay where you are," I said, already knowing how impossible that was. "I'm going to attempt to locate you." The radio hissed, then a quiet, almost relieved exhale came through. "Thank you," the voice said. "It's very cold here." The transmission cut abruptly. The forest seemed to lean inward. The silence returned, heavier than before, broken only by the distant creak of ice shifting somewhere deep below the snowpack. I packed fast. Headlamp, emergency flare, first aid kit, rifle. The smell followed me inside the cabin now, clinging to my clothes, sharp and wrong, as if I'd brushed against exposed wiring. I hesitated at the doorway, hand on the radio power switch. The rule pressed down on me again. Do not respond, do not engage, wait for morning. But the idea of people bleeding out in the dark while I sat warm behind a door felt worse than whatever consequence breaking the rule carried. I stepped outside and locked the cabin behind me. The snow swallowed my boots with a dry crunch that echoed too loudly in the stillness. As I moved into the trees, my headlamp beam caught strange shadows, long angular shapes where branches should have been natural curves. Every few steps I stopped and listened. No wind, no wildlife, no distant howl or wing beat, just my own breathing, and faintly, far ahead, that same metal groan, slower now, like something settling into place. The transmission crackled once more, unprompted. "Ranger, it's getting closer."
I stopped walking. The radio was still warm against my chest, like it had been transmitting far longer than it should have without draining the battery. "What's getting closer?" I asked, keeping my voice low, as if volume mattered out here. The reply came with a faint delay, the signal warping like it was being pulled through water. "We don't know," the voice said. "It isn't loud. We feel it more than hear it." My headlamp beam cut through the trees, illuminating snow-coated trunks packed far tighter than the maps suggested. This forest felt compressed, as if the land itself had been folded inward. The smell of burnt metal grew stronger with every step, now mixed with something else, oil maybe, or heated stone. I checked my compass. The needle jittered, swinging back and forth before settling in the wrong direction. "That's not possible," I muttered aloud. I adjusted course manually, following the faint depression in the snow that suggested something heavy had passed through recently. The ground sloped downward, and the forest thinned abruptly ahead, opening into a shallow basin. The temperature dropped sharply there, the cold biting through my gloves as if I'd stepped into shade that didn't belong to the night. My headlamp flickered once, then steadied. What it revealed made my breath catch. The snow was torn apart in a wide circular pattern. Trees snapped cleanly near their bases and bent outward as if something had descended fast and hard. In the center of the clearing sat an object half buried in ice. It wasn't shaped like any aircraft I recognized. No wings, no rotors, no visible seams. Just a smooth, elongated mass, dark and reflective, like wet stone under moonlight. Even damaged, it looked wrong. Too intact for a crash, too quiet. My radio crackled. "We're here," the voice said. "Please hurry." The sound didn't come from the object. It came from everywhere around it, layered and directionless, as if the clearing itself were speaking. I took one step closer, and the metal groan returned, deeper now, resonating through my bones. The object shifted. Not much, just enough to send fine cracks racing through the surrounding ice like spiderwebs. I raised my rifle, hands shaking, every instinct screaming that I should not be here. This was the rule. This was why they never explained it. The radio buzzed again. "Ranger," the voice said, "you broke the rule."
The words hit harder than the cold. "How do you know about the rule?" I demanded, my voice sounding thin in the open clearing. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then another voice joined the transmission, not layered, not distorted, calm. "Because it's our rule too." The object's surface rippled, not visibly moving, but changing somehow, like heat waves rising off asphalt. My headlamp dimmed, the beam losing strength, even though the battery indicator still showed full. I took another step back, boots slipping slightly on the ice. "Identify yourselves," I said again, forcing authority into my tone. "You're in restricted land. Respond immediately." A low vibration rolled through the clearing, rattling snow loose from the broken trees. The smell intensified, sharp enough to make my eyes water. "We were never meant to land," the first voice said, sounding strained now. "Something pulled us." My radio buzzed louder, other frequencies bleeding through, snippets of voices, fragments of words, none of them meant for me. "Do not engage. Containment breach. If contact occurs." I clutched the radio to my chest, heart pounding. The training manual never mentioned this. There were no procedures for an object that ignored physics or voices that knew your name. The surface of the object split silently, not cracking, but unfolding, revealing a dark interior that swallowed the light from my headlamp completely. A cold wind rushed outward, carrying the smell of old metal and something else beneath it, stale air, like a room sealed for decades. The voice came again, no longer sounding desperate. "You shouldn't have answered," it said. "Now it knows you can hear it." From inside the opening, something shifted, slow and deliberate. The ground vibrated beneath my feet, and somewhere deep in the forest, far beyond the clearing, that same metal groan echoed back, answering like a call. I realized then that this wasn't the only one, and the rule hadn't been about protecting us. It had been about keeping them asleep. I ran. Not back toward the cabin. My legs took me sideways, skidding along the edge of the clearing as the ground shuddered beneath each step. The snow felt softer here, unstable, as if the earth had been hollowed out beneath it. The radio screamed with overlapping signals, voices stacked on top of each other, some shouting warnings, others whispering things I couldn't understand. My headlamp finally died, plunging the forest into darkness, broken only by pale starlight reflecting off the snow. I forced myself to slow, counting breaths, listening. The metal groan followed me, not loud, but persistent, pulsing through the ground like a second heartbeat. The smell of burnt metal clung to my jacket, stronger now, as if I were carrying the source with me. I ducked behind a fallen spruce and shut off the radio completely. The sudden silence felt worse. The forest didn't return to normal. No wind rose, no animals resumed their calls. It was as if everything living had withdrawn, leaving only me and whatever had come down from the sky. A faint crunch sounded nearby, not footsteps, too irregular, too heavy. A shape moved between the trees, tall and indistinct, its outline bending the starlight around it. I held my breath, rifle pressed uselessly against my shoulder. My training dissolved into instinct. Don't be seen, don't make sound. The shape paused, head or something like it, tilting slightly, as if listening. I realized then the radio hadn't been how it found me. It had been my voice. The thing shifted away, gliding rather than walking, leaving behind faint impressions in the snow that steamed briefly before freezing solid again. I stayed hidden until my muscles ached and my fingers went numb. When I finally moved, I went low and slow, circling wide, using memory instead of instruments to guide me. The compass still spun uselessly. The stars looked wrong, too, subtly misaligned, as if the sky itself had shifted. By the time I saw the faint outline of the cabin through the trees, dawn was bleeding into the horizon in thin gray bands. I locked the door behind me and collapsed against it, lungs burning. The smell lingered inside, stronger than ever, soaking into the wood. I logged the incident exactly as instructed. Unscheduled transmission, Channel 7, anomalous interference, no survivors located. I didn't mention the object, I didn't mention the voices, and I didn't sleep.
At 9 a.m., a helicopter arrived without notice. No markings, no radio call. It settled into the clearing near the cabin with surgical precision, rotors cutting the air but making less noise than they should have. 3 people stepped out, faces hidden behind reflective visors, movements calm and practiced. They knew my name, they knew what I'd logged, and they knew what I hadn't. The tallest one spoke first. "You responded." It wasn't a question. I nodded, throat tight. "You broke the rule," another said, almost gently. "Why?" I thought of the voice on the radio, the cold in it, the relief. "They asked for help," I said. The visor reflected my face back at me, pale and hollow. "They always do," the first one replied. They stayed for less than an hour. One of them walked into the forest toward the restricted zone and never looked back. When they left, the helicopter rose straight up, vanishing into the clouds like it had never been there. By noon, the smell was gone. The forest sounds returned cautiously, wind through branches, the distant call of a bird testing the silence. I was reassigned the next day. No explanation, no debrief, just new orders and a warning stamped in red across the file. Compliance failure, monitor. I don't answer Channel 7 anymore. But sometimes, late at night, when the aurora flares and the cold presses close, my radio turns on by itself. The battery reads dead. The voice never asks for help now. It just says my name. And somewhere deep in the Alaskan wilderness, something metal groans in reply.
They moved me south, closer to civilization, but far enough that the nights were still quiet. The new post was smaller, cleaner, and wrong in a different way. No restricted zones, no unmarked maps, but the rules were the same, copied word for word into the orientation packet. When I saw Channel 7 listed again, my stomach tightened. I didn't touch the radio for weeks. I told myself the Alaskan incident had been contained, whatever that meant, that the object was buried, dismantled, erased. Then the smells started. At first, it was subtle. Burnt metal drifting through the station late at night, gone by morning. I checked wiring, heaters, generators. Nothing explained it. The second week, the sounds followed. A low groan beneath the floorboards, always distant, always slow, like pressure building somewhere deep underground. I stopped sleeping. I started logging everything. I never transmitted. After midnight on the 21st day, the radio turned on by itself. Channel 7. The volume rose gradually, carefully, as if whoever was on the other end didn't want to startle me. The voice wasn't desperate anymore. "You're farther now," it said, "but not far enough." My hands shook as I reached for the power switch. It didn't respond. "We didn't crash this time," the voice continued. "We were placed." The walls creaked, settling unnaturally, though the weather outside was calm. I caught a faint reflection in the window behind the radio, something tall, standing just beyond the tree line, barely visible in the darkness. "Why me?" I whispered. The radio hissed, then answered. "You listened." I broke the second rule that night. I left the station after dark. I followed the sound, deeper into terrain that hadn't been mapped, trees growing denser the farther I went, branches knitting together overhead until the stars disappeared. The air grew colder with every step, sharp enough to burn. The smell returned in force, thick and metallic, coating the back of my throat. The groan resolved into something clearer now, a rhythm, a signal. I reached a clearing I knew shouldn't exist, the snow untouched, smooth as glass. At its center sat another object, smaller than the first, smoother, more complete. I didn't need the radio to hear the voice anymore. "This one's awake," it said. The surface of the object reflected my face, but not correctly. My eyes were slightly out of sync, blinking a fraction of a second too late. I felt pressure behind my ears, like altitude sickness without the climb. "We learned from the last breach," the voice said. "Fewer mistakes, fewer witnesses." The forest around the clearing leaned inward, trees bending toward the object, as if pulled by gravity. I backed away, heart hammering. "You won't remember everything," the voice continued, almost kindly, "but you'll remember enough." The ground vibrated. The metal groan deepened, and as the object began to open, I realized the rule had never been about radio transmissions at all. It had been about attention, and once you give it, it never stops listening. I don't remember leaving the clearing. What I remember is waking up on my bunk with my boots still on and snow melting into the floor beneath them. The station lights were on. The radio sat on the desk, silent, powered off, its antenna bent at a sharp angle, like it had been forced down. My head throbbed, a deep pressure behind my eyes, and my mouth tasted like old pennies. I checked the clock. 3 hours had passed that I couldn't account for. I logged the incident, or tried to. The pen kept slipping from my fingers, my handwriting drifting off the lines, like my hands no longer remembered their job. When I reviewed the security footage, the screen showed static from 0012 to 0304. No power surge,
No data loss, just static, thick and pulsing, in time with that familiar groan I could almost hear through the speakers. That morning, new rules appeared in the system. Not emailed, not briefed, they were just there. Rule 7 had been amended. If contact progresses beyond auditory engagement, relocation is mandatory. Non-compliance will result in reassignment or termination. The word termination sat heavier than the rest. I tried to request a transfer. The request failed. I tried again from another terminal. Failed. That's when I noticed the maps had changed. Trails rerouted themselves when I wasn't looking. Forbidden zones expanded by inches each hour, like something slowly inhaling. The smell never fully left now. It seeped from the walls, the vents, my clothes. I could hear the groan even during the day, buried beneath normal sounds, like it was learning how to hide. By nightfall, the radio came on again. "You're part of the system now," the voice said. "Observation point, mobile." I slammed the radio against the desk. The casing cracked. The voice continued anyway. "We don't move unless you do."
I tried to leave the next morning. The access road was gone. Not blocked, not damaged, gone. Where it should have been was untouched forest, trees centuries old, their roots knotted together like they'd never been disturbed. I drove until the fuel gauge dipped below empty. The engine didn't die. The groan grew louder instead, resonating through the frame of the truck. I stopped when I saw it. A third object, half exposed between the trees, closer to the surface this time, like it was rising instead of falling. This one was different. I could feel it before I saw it, a pressure behind my eyes, a pull in my chest. "This is how containment works," the voice said, no longer bothering with the radio. "You anchor the site." Images flooded my mind. Other rangers, other places, scattered across forests, deserts, ice fields, all standing too close to objects they never should have answered. "You're not the first rookie," the voice continued, "just the first who survived long enough to understand." The object hummed softly, a vibration that synced with my heartbeat. My vision blurred. The smell became overwhelming, metal and ozone and something old, like air trapped underground for centuries. "You can still help people," the voice said, "by staying." I thought of the rules, the manuals, the silence when questions were asked. I realized then why the stories never spread, why no one ever came back screaming about what they'd seen. They stayed. I backed away, every instinct screaming no, but the forest leaned with me, branches creaking, snow shifting under unseen weight. "You already broke the rule," the voice reminded me. "That's how we know you're compatible." The object hummed once, brighter than the rest, and somewhere far away, another ranger's radio turned on. I tried to destroy the radio first. If I couldn't leave, I could at least stop listening. I smashed it against a rock until the casing split and the battery skittered across the snow. The forest went silent in a way I hadn't heard before, too complete, like sound itself had been shut off. Then the voice spoke anyway, directly inside my head. "You don't need the tool anymore." Pain bloomed behind my eyes, sharp and sudden, and I dropped to one knee. The objects weren't transmitters, they were anchors, and I had made myself one by answering. I staggered back toward the station, every step heavier than the last, like gravity increased the farther I got from the clearing. Inside, the walls had changed. The wood grain twisted subtly, lines bending toward the floor beneath the radio desk. The smell was constant now, soaked into everything. I checked the incident archive, scrolling through decades of reports, flagged transmissions, missing rangers, reassignments with no follow-up. The pattern was unmistakable. Rookies, quiet posts, remote terrain, people who followed rules until one night they didn't. The voice returned, calmer than ever. You help us stabilize. You reduce noise. You prevent exposure. Images pressed into my mind. Cities, crowds, radios screaming with signals they couldn't filter. Panic spreading faster than containment could respond. That was the real threat. Not the objects being found, but too many people listening. I understood then why survival was allowed. They didn't want martyrs. They wanted caretakers. By nightfall, I could feel the others, not voices exactly, but presences, spaced far apart, each one tied to something buried or hidden. We formed a network, and networks didn't need movement. I sat at the desk and began a new log, entry format already filled in for me. Unscheduled transmission prevented, no civilian contact, monitoring ongoing. My hand didn't shake when I signed my name.
Weeks passed, or maybe longer. Time softened around the edges. The forest stopped resisting me. It adjusted. Trees grew where I needed cover. Paths opened when I walked. The object stayed quiet as long as I stayed attentive. The voice checked in less often now, confident. I received a transmission one night. Channel 7. A new voice. A younger one. Scared. Hello? Is anyone there? My finger hovered over the logbook. The rule echoed faintly, a relic from another life. Do not respond. I smelled cold air and pine and something metallic beneath it. I knew exactly where they were. I knew what would happen if they stayed alone too long. The voice came again, desperate. Please. I reached for the radio and stopped. The network pulsed, waiting. This was the real test, not obedience, but choice. I logged the call as interference, power fluctuation, aurora activity. The transmission faded. The forest exhaled somewhere far away. The voice never came back. Morning light crept through the windows, pale and clean. I stepped outside, breath fogging in the cold, and listened. No groan, no signal. Just wilderness, doing what it had always done. I was still a ranger. I still protected people, just not the way I'd imagined. And far beneath the snow, the objects slept, held in place by those of us who learned too late why the rules existed. I stopped counting the days when the sun no longer felt like a marker of safety. Light didn't chase anything away here. It just revealed how well everything had adapted. The forest around my station changed subtly over time. Trees leaned inward, forming natural barriers where paths once were. Snowfalls erased old tracks faster than they should have, smoothing the ground into something untouched and innocent-looking. Anyone passing through would see wilderness. No signs, no warnings, no reason to stay alert. The network stayed quiet most nights, but I felt it constantly now, a low awareness, like pressure in the air before a storm. I could sense when one of the others was struggling, when someone far away shifted too close to their object, when a rule bent somewhere it shouldn't have. The smell would spike then, sharp and metallic, even miles from the nearest anchor site. That was when the voice returned, firm but calm. Correct it. I learned how. To reroute trails, to falsify weather data, to recommend reassignment under the guise of safety concerns. I became good at it. Too good. One night, while reviewing satellite images, I noticed a faint anomaly forming north of my sector. A depression in the snow, circular and precise, trees bending outward just slightly. I stared at it for a long time, chest tight. A new one. The voice didn't comment. It didn't need to. The forest would soon grow quieter there, the way it always did. I prepared a report before anyone else could see it. Routine terrain shift, natural subsidence, no action required. As I filed it, I felt the network pulse in approval, and somewhere far away, something metal settled deeper into the earth. I stopped counting the days when the sun no longer felt like a marker of safety. Light didn't chase anything away here. It just revealed how well everything had adapted. The forest around my station changed subtly over time. Trees leaned inward, forming natural barriers where paths once were. Snowfalls erased old tracks faster than they should have, smoothing the ground into something untouched and innocent-looking. Anyone passing through would see wilderness. No signs, no warnings, no reason to stay alert. The network stayed quiet most nights, but I felt it constantly now, a low awareness, like pressure in the air before a storm. I could sense when one of the others was struggling, when someone far away shifted too close to their object, when a rule bent somewhere it shouldn't have. The smell would spike then, sharp and metallic, even miles from the nearest anchor site. That was when the voice returned, firm but calm. Correct it. I learned how. To reroute trails, to falsify weather data, to recommend reassignment under the guise of safety concerns. I became good at it. Too good. One night, while reviewing satellite images, I noticed a faint anomaly forming north of my sector. A depression in the snow, circular and precise, trees bending outward just slightly. I stared at it for a long time, chest tight. A new one. The voice didn't comment. It didn't need to. The forest would soon grow quieter there, the way it always did. I prepared a report before anyone else could see it. Routine terrain shift, natural subsidence, no action required. As I filed it, I felt the network pulse in approval, and somewhere far away, something metal settled deeper into the earth. The came in winter, buried inside a routine staffing update. No alarms, no urgency, just a name added to my sector. Ranger trainee, Noah Pierce. 22, first posting. Remote, eager. I felt the network stir the moment I read it. Not hunger, not excitement, expectation. I watched his progress through reports and satellite pings as he made his way north, every mile bringing him closer to something he didn't know how to name yet. The forest adjusted ahead of him the way it always did. Trails softened, certain landmarks blurred. I made sure his radio was issued with the old firmware, the kind that still carried Channel 7. He arrived at his station just before dusk. I smelled burnt metal an hour later, faint but undeniable. That night, the aurora was strong, the kind that bends signals and loosens barriers. I sat at my desk, staring at my own radio, powered off, untouched. The rule echoed, not from the manual, but from memory. Do not respond. Monitor only. At 23:41, Channel 7 activated itself. The voice wasn't the one I remembered. It was newer, cleaner, less strained. Ranger Pierce, it said gently. We need assistance.
I closed my eyes. The network waited. Not forcing, not demanding. This was always the moment where the system proved it worked, where the world stayed intact because someone chose silence. I logged the transmission as interference, Aurora-related anomaly. No response initiated. The voice tried again, urgency creeping in. Please. I felt the object nearest him stir far away, a subtle shift beneath snow and stone. The forest leaned inward around his station, listening. I did not answer. The transmission faded, and the network settled into stillness.
Weeks passed. No incident reports from Pierce. No broken rules. He adapted quickly. The kind who respected boundaries. The kind who survived. The smell faded back into the background level I'd come to accept. The groan never returned. I received my final update in early spring. Reassignment approved. Indefinite tenure. Containment stable. I printed the notice and burned it in the stove, watching the paper curl and blacken, the smoke carrying that faint metallic edge before disappearing up the flue. That night, I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. The forest stood calm, snow melting in slow, natural rhythms. Birds tested the air with cautious calls. Everything looked normal. That was the greatest success of all. I keyed my radio one last time, not to transmit, but to disable Channel 7 permanently. The screen flickered, then went dark. The network didn't resist. It didn't need to. I'd already done my part. I left the radio on the desk and walked into the trees, following a path that opened only for me. I didn't know how long I'd remain a ranger, or when someone else would take my place. But I knew this much. The objects would sleep. The forest would keep its secrets, and the rules would remain, passed quietly from one rookie to the next, never explained, only enforced. Because the worst things don't need guards.